It seemed like any other day at Lowndes High School, with kids hurrying between classes, laughing, talking, eating lunch, and shooting baskets in the gym. Not one person would have guessed that a fellow student was fighting for his life just a few feet away. This is the fatal breakdown of Kendrick Johnson's tragic death. Kendrick's mom was getting worried. At first, she was just annoyed that he was late for his 10 p.m. curfew and was already thinking about the speech she would give him about being late. After another 30 minutes, she had finished calling around to locate her son. He wasn't at any friends' houses, and no one had seen him at the basketball game after school. She drove directly to the school to search the parking lot and found a janitor who stated that the school had been empty for hours. It was now 12:30, and Johnson called the police. They checked hospitals and police reports to see if anything suspicious had happened that day. None of the kids contacted remembered seeing Kendrick at the game, or even after school at any point. Through a difficult night, Jacqueline Johnson was sick thinking about all the things that might have happened to her son. First thing in the morning, school records were checked to see if they could figure out when Kendrick had left school for the day. His attendance shows that he was in class for the first half of the day, but didn't attend any classes in the afternoon. The police were trying to figure out where Kendrick might have gone. What other friends did he have? Were there any places he might go to be alone? They were really at a loss, because Kendrick just wasn't the kind of kid who would run off and not call his family. Something must be wrong. It was now 10:30 in the morning on January 11th, and kids had started their next block of classes. This included a gym class in what was called the Old Gym. Many students gathered on the bleachers, chatting before the bell rang. Just next to where they sat, there were quite a few large gym mats, rolled and standing up on their ends. This was a usual place for kids to have a seat in a more comfortable and secluded corner. There were remnants of candy wrappers and drinks, all evidence of the kids who sat around relaxing in this space. Two sisters climbed onto the mats and walked across to find a comfortable seat. In the most shocking moment possible, they looked down to see two socked feet just inside one of the mats. It took a second look to really be sure, but the recognition was horrifying. Someone was rolled up in the mat. They called over the teacher and immediately got down off the mats. Mr. Peeplow quickly moved other mats out of the way and reached the roll with the teen inside. He laid it on the side and immediately saw the unthinkable. A boy was inside the mat, and he was no longer alive. The gym was evacuated, and the police were called from the office to come down to the gym. They had finally found Kendrick Johnson. So what happened to Kendrick? Kendrick Johnson was a normal kid attending Loudness High School in Valdosta, Georgia. As school returned from the Christmas break, students were excited to get back to campus with sports after school, socializing between classes, and starting a new year, 2013. This was just the second day back, January 10th, so spirits were high and attention spans were good. Kendrick was between classes, moving through the halls heading to the gym to get his basketball shoes. His fourth block class was weightlifting over in the field house, so he had stopped by the old gym to grab his tennis shoes. Kendrick shared a pair of gym shoes with his friend so that they could both keep their nice school shoes clean during workouts. The normal routine was that one of them would wear the shoes, then throw them down the center of a gym mat in the corner of the old gym. This was a good way to keep them in a central location, so both boys could access them when needed. Lots of kids did the same thing, because lockers in this school had to be rented by the students. This method served as a sort of locker in the corner of the gym. The mats standing in the corner were large, heavy floor mats, which were rolled up and standing on end. When you needed your items from the mats, you could just tilt the mat to the side and pick up your shoes from the floor. Kendrick entered the gym at the same time as several other students and headed over to the mats. He was a little confused at first, because there were more mats than before the Christmas break, so he wasn't sure where the shoes were located. He hopped up on top of the mats and looked down a few to find the shoes. After a moment, he found them in a mat against the wall. He reached inside and was able to grab one of his shoes because it was later found on top of the mats, along with his yellow folder. Apparently, the other shoe was wedged a little farther into the hole. The rolls were 6 feet high, so he couldn't just reach far enough to grab it. Because so many extra mats were placed in the corner, this mat was trapped in place, and he couldn't tip it on its side to reach up from the bottom. He extended one arm to reach down and squeezed his shoulders into the tight opening. It was only 14 inches wide, so he would have had to roll his shoulders together some to squeeze in. With one arm extended forward, he would have been more narrow across the shoulder area and found his way in. He was able to push his upper body into the hole and slide forward. Unfortunately, he passed a point of recoverability. The weight of his body pushed him farther into the central hole. His legs would have still been sticking up out of the mat, so he probably thought he would find a way back out. The impossible part of this challenge was that he had one arm reaching in and one arm trapped down by his side. It would have only taken a moment to realize how dangerous this situation really was. He probably screamed as loud as his lungs would allow, but the mats insulated the sound waves. There would have been no way for the sound to escape. There were several kids shooting baskets at the other end of the gym, so the extra noise would have drowned out any possible sounds he made. If his legs were still up in the air, the kids didn't really notice. It was probably only for less than a minute before he would have slid down and wedged himself so permanently he just could not breathe. 3 kids did acknowledge seeing Kendrick on top of the mats. It was probably a fleeting moment for them in an otherwise normal day on campus. The kids who were in the gym playing basketball didn't hear or see anything out of the ordinary. For Kendrick, the crucial minutes were just hidden from everyone else nearby. Once his feet were no longer visible, absolutely no one knew he was inside. He probably died within minutes of reaching for his shoe. The autopsy stated that he died from positional asphyxiation before 2 o'clock on January 10th. The extensive video system at the school showed him entering the gym at 1:28, so there was a small window of time where he must have tragically died. When his body was discovered, questions started flying immediately that he could have been murdered, then rolled up into a mat to hide the body. The school had 35 cameras on campus, including 7 in and around the gym. These cameras captured his path to the mats and all the students who were in the area. The camera system was one that only recorded 1 frame per second and was motion activated. Additionally, the camera pointed at the mats had been hit by a ball many months before, so it was blurry and pointed down some. This all limited some of the information gathered, but when the footage is lined up time-wise, it's clear to see that no one else was in that area. No one saw or heard any disagreement or altercation. The mat would have had to been laid out, then rolled up and moved to the back against the wall. Then other mats would have had to been placed in front of it. That's a lot of work to be done in secret, and would take several people. There just was no evidence to support this theory. There have been many extensive investigations regarding this possibility. The police investigated the scene for at least 5 hours before the coroner was brought into the body. Fingernails on the gym floor, candy wrappers, and bloody tissues were all collected and tested as potential evidence toward finding a killer. Items were additionally tested for blood near the crime scene, and witnesses were questioned to understand what they had found. It appeared to be a horrific accident. The case was reopened several times and examined completely by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Department, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the NAACP, and the Federal Department of Justice. 3 separate autopsies were performed as well. With the totality of evidence laid out, it appears to be a devastating accident. There were several strange and inappropriate moments in the initial investigation, with the autopsies, evidence, witness statements, and the investigative timeline. Over time, all of these issues were addressed and explained. None of these questions changed the essential facts that this great kid died in an accident and not due to a murder. The community and classmates of Kendrick were horrified by his death, and absolutely no one wanted to believe that a murderer could exist in their midst. After all the information was carefully studied and analyzed, it is clear that Kendrick Johnson endured a terrible end to his precious life. A freak accident in the middle of an otherwise normal school day. Tell us what you think. Comment below your thoughts on this case.